third episode of the Thinking Differently series brought to you by Ground Control. Today we're talking with James Combs of Combs' Coffee in Corinth, Texas. Well, hey everybody, this is Chris DiFiorio with Keys to the Shop, and welcome to the final episode in the Thinking Differently series brought to you by Ground Control. I'm really excited to share this one with you today. In this series, we've been focusing on entrepreneurs who are taking a different approach to how they do their business and the difference that they're making through thinking differently. And like I mentioned, this series is brought to you by Ground Control. Ground Control makes the Cyclops Brewer, which is the epitome of thinking differently when it comes to how we brew coffee in the cafe. Its award-winning technology gives the user unmatched control over ranges of flavors that you didn't think your coffee could achieve, and consistently so. Not only that, this machine also, with its small footprint and award-winning design, has the ability to make hot chocolate, tea, and iced lattes, batched iced lattes, in fact, and cold brew. All of this in one machine absolutely revolutionizes the amount of productivity, efficiency that you can have on bar, all while raising the game on the product itself, taking batch brew and more to the next level. And this is the kind of thing that gives you an edge as a retailer. If having an efficient machine that raises the game on your quality and creates more productivity in your space is something that appeals to you, if you want to think differently about brewing great coffee in your shop, then I definitely recommend you look into getting a Ground Control Cyclops Brewer for your store. To do that, just go over to groundcontrol.coffee. That's their website, groundcontrol.coffee. And while you're there, don't forget to check out the bonus episode with our guest today, James Combs, as we continue our conversation with material that you're not going to hear on this particular interview, which is only available over at groundcontrol.coffee/KTTS. And you can get the bonus episode with James Combs there while you're exploring what Ground Control is all about. Again, that website, groundcontrol.coffee/KTTS. Okay, everybody. Well, we're wrapping up our series today with an awesome interview with the founder of Combs' Coffee in Corinth, Texas, James Combs. James founded Combs' Coffee in 2013 when he visited East Africa on a sourcing trip with a friend. He fell in love with tea and coffee on that trip, and there he began his journey into the specialty coffee world, quickly becoming a Q grader and a judge in coffee competitions all over the world. He started his roasting operation right from the beginning with a solar-powered roaster operated at his house in Corinth, Texas. After 8 years, he's now operating the world's largest solar-powered coffee roasting operation with a 30-kilowatt solar array, 3 commercial machines housed in a 100-year-old Coca Cola bottling facility. He currently imports tea and cocoa as well as coffee and offers local wine and craft beer. Everything they do at Combs' Coffee is based on the idea of keeping things close to nature, having as small of an impact as possible, down to how they serve their roasted coffee in reusable glass jars, to their solar-powered roasting, the way they design their cafes and source material for them. James has an insatiable desire to push the envelope when it comes to sustainability and quality in his operations, and you're going to get a behind-the-scenes look at how he has gone about building this fantastic business that sets such a great example for retailers in terms of sustainability, from the time he founded his company to scaling the business, and then what his plans are for the future. James has really infectious and unending energy for all the projects that he's involved in, and I think you're going to leave this feeling pretty inspired in terms of what you possibly can do in your operations and how maybe you can think differently about your own impact on sustainability through your retail and roasting operations. So with all that said, I'm excited to share this interview with you with the founder of Combs' Coffee, James Combs. Well, James, welcome to Keys to the Shop. So glad to have you. How are you doing today?
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been listening to a few of your episodes and becoming a pretty big fan, man.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, you've been busy, and you've built a ton of different elements within your business around sustainability and super ambitious projects. And I'm really interested in getting to know the story of Combs Coffee, and I guess starting from the beginning is a good way to go. You started in 2013 And you weren't in coffee beforehand, before diving headfirst into coffee. Catch us up on how you discovered coffee, or at least how you went from the industry of the finance world to the coffee industry.
Yeah, so it goes a little bit further than that. I mean, I started in the restaurant industry when I was 12, so I've got about 13 going on 14 years of food service in general. Again, just from the bottom up, just washing dishes to line cook. I was a pastry chef and then ended up running line cook jobs at two different restaurants simultaneously when I was like 17 years old, and then was managing and assistant managing a franchise when I was 18, and then decided that I didn't want to get into the food service industry. I was originally going to go to culinary school. I loved it so much. And then I found out that you don't really make more than $40,000 a year after you struggle for about, 5 years or more in different kitchens, just basically starting over again. So I thought computer science and finance would be a better route, just something desk job, a little more stable, something where I could actually buy a house and have a family and a life. So, I ended up sticking it out in finance for 10 years. And about halfway through, I was just bored to tears and really missed cooking and just being a human, smelling and tasting things. It's really hard when you just love food and just love every element of being a person. And then you're an automaton, just, coding and going to meetings and filling out spreadsheets. And I got into operations management towards the tail end of it, which afforded me the opportunity to work remote. So I ended up taking my month of vacation time and ended up going to Africa in 2013 with a friend that was going out for Christmas. And we were mostly looking for tea. We were originally just going to be a tea company. I fell in love with tea mostly through my brother, but I had friends and family that had been in the coffee industry, and I was always jealous. I was an outsider looking in with all these coffee memes, and it just seems like such a fun like cult culture that I was always jealous that I really never understood it or got it. It's like, looking at your friends that smoke or something like that. There's just something that is like alluring about it, but it's so disgusting you can't quite get into it. But yeah, going to Africa and tasting fresh coffee right there at the source was an eye opener. And we ended up spending about half of our time on that initial trip in 2013 buying coffee, and ended up with an entire pallet full of coffee that I bought just because I had the money to do so. I bought a ton of tea while I was at it and got it back home, and had to learn how to sell it, how to roast it, and ended up having my brother, who was working for a local coffee company. He worked for a roastery, and he also worked for Cultivar, which is a local company, as well as a couple of others. And I roasted it for him, and he tasted it, and he's like, "Where did you get this?" I was like, "From Kenya." He's like, "No, but like, how did you get your hands on this quality of coffee just stumbling across it in Kenya?" It's like, it's everywhere out there. Like, we found some really good farms. And he's like, "Yeah, have you had it Q graded?" So I didn't know what that meant, and started looking into it a bit more. And my curiosity got the better of me. And by the time I went to Costa Rica in 2016, we were starting to really go to SCA labs and started to get deeper into it. And I really just was bit by the tasting side of coffee and just the objective measures that you can score coffees. And I ended up getting my Q Arabica grader's license in 2016 as well, and passed my first time, which was awesome, and have been getting recalibrated and going to Cup of Excellence events. I'm Alliance for Coffee Excellence certified as an international judge for them now too. And then I do some CQI events, mostly in China for the Best of Yunnan nowadays. But yeah, just mostly boredom. I tell a lot of people, when you just sit at a desk all day, there are very few things that bring you joy, and tea and coffee were just two of those things that just became repetitious and almost ritualistic. And we started having little coffee clubs, and you get more and more serious, paying closer and closer attention to what you're doing. And especially as you start roasting and cupping coffees, it just becomes this power that it has over you, and it slowly sucks you in. So most people that are saying, "Oh, I'm not really into coffee," I'm like, don't get into coffee. It will completely change your life and take over after a while. So be very gentle, because it's easy to become obsessed with coffee. And I finally truly get it. And now we're setting up coffee schools so we can infect other people that really want to get closer to it and try to make it easier for people to approach.
So it sounds like your fascination with coffee and tea, as it led you to this new business, because you're board in finance, was sort of an extension of who you were already. Because you stuck in finance for 10 years, you dove into the food industry for so long. So it sounds like just when you put your hand to something, you have you can become really fascinated with it, whether it's, the coding or food, and now coffee and tea. Seems like there's just a lot of curiosity going on here that helps guide you as you put your hand to something. Is that about right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I never, was completely hooked on one career path when I was younger. I really enjoy a lot of different things, but yeah, I always tell people just follow your curiosity and a passion can develop out of it. But I mean, yeah, if it really captures your imagination and your attention for a long period of time, just lean into it. And that was, I think, where my love in finance kind of ended, is once you get into management at whatever level, you can see pretty clearly what your life is going to look like for the next 10 years. And when you kind of look up at the C suites above you, or, whatever position of leadership that you could potentially be in, it's not quite as luxurious as it sounds. And, even a little bit more money beyond six figures is really not worth it for the amount of work that it takes, and just how much of your life that it takes. I think I was just kind of seeking for more meaning, and also the ability to travel more. That was really the biggest bonus that I saw with coffee. Is it's a global thing. I mean, we can travel every continent on the planet, which I already have done with the exception of Antarctica, and find at least water and coffee. And it's almost impossible to travel to every single farm. So, I mean, there's really no end in sight with coffee. And I think that's the beauty of it, is between coffee and tea, they're global commodities and some of the most consumed beverages on the planet. And they're recession proof. You have to drink them almost every day. They're addictive. There's just so many different elements that make it good for business, but it's also something where it can really keep your attention for a long period of time. And I think that's why I'm most in love with those two in particular. But again, chocolate, wine, beer, we're into those elements for the same reason. They just don't go away. They've been around for millennia, and it's just part of human nature and culture, just to continue to study those elements, I guess.
So when you entered into the coffee industry, what surprised you the most about the coffee industry, in terms of just being introduced to it as a whole? And then as you were introduced to it, what was the most challenging part? You mentioned that you became a Q grader, Cup of Excellence certified, and you're kind of exploring all of those channels of taste calibration, quality assessment, etc. Those are not without challenge. And I wonder, what was the most challenging thing about getting your coffee skills down, and how did that introduction to the industry first hit you?
Yeah. The most fascinating element, I think, was just water. The fact that water's almost 99% of your cup of coffee, depending on how you brew it, is amazing. And just what goes into the chemistry of water alone to make a good cup of coffee, and how very few people understand the relationship to just water quality and, grind size and temperature. Those three things alone, I think, are absolutely fascinating. There's a lot to be discovered even still on those elements too. But in terms of challenges, the Q was huge for me. Just getting the confidence to be able to say, hey, I know what good coffee is, because there's so many experts and critics, that you deal with every day. Everybody uses the term, coffee snob, but usually they don't have an objective measure on describing exactly what they like and don't like. So I think just me personally being able to have that confidence to say, yes, this is a good cup of coffee, and put pen to paper and show people exactly where it sits. And then also to make sure that, I'm in calibration with a global standard like the Coffee Quality Institute, and going to Cup of Excellence competitions is really like where that all comes to a head for me, and is incredibly challenging, but also the most rewarding, where you get to sit in a room and deliberate after a cupping with people from all over the world, and just even go on stage and talk to the farmers about just what our industry is looking for. So just how widespread it is, and just how impactful it is, but also how similar it is all over the world is just, it's absolutely incredible, but it's also really difficult, to navigate that in the beginning and get comfortable with it, I think is really the hardest part.
So now, of course, you're tasting all of these coffees and you're roasting coffee yourself. And so as your skills increase in your tasting, your roasting has to get better in order to bring out the flavors that you're tasting more and more in coffee. So how did you go about just like iterating in your roasting process as your palate developed? I imagine there's a huge difference today versus when you were first starting out in roasting.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is we started with just 3 solar panels, charge controller, a power inverter, a 2000-watt inverter, and like a bank of Optimas to create like an off-grid system. So I had like a third of a pound roaster to start with, and then I slowly moved to a half-pound roaster, and then into a 1 kilo, and then bought another 1 kilo, and had it, in my garage eventually, with a hole cut in the roof with a big vent stack going through the garage. And my whole house was, lined with 28 solar panels that created like an 8 kilowatt system. So we just slowly grew our roasting size and ability from just really, more or less cheesy roasters, up to, Diedrichs and Giesens, and now we're getting a 15 kilo Pro Bat. So I think it's been organic just in growth, or as I, was better at roasting, then I did better, and I paid closer attention and made smaller tweaks along the way. But the price of our coffees also increased over the years as well. So that was nice, where I had really low overhead in the beginning. So I was able to sell really good specialty coffee that was roasted, okay. And people appreciated it because it was fresher and it was a higher quality bean to start with. But as I got more developed in tasting and more experience with roasting and better equipment and even access to better beans as I went to different countries and work with different producers to get different qualities over the years, it's just organically grown into what it is today. And I definitely don't think that this is the end of the journey by any stretch of the imagination. Each new machine comes with new challenges. Each coffee can have a completely different profile. And to complicate things further, we do like a light, medium, and dark offering in almost every single coffee that we sell, with the exception of, geishas and some of the coffees that are north of $100 a pound that we sell. Those we typically reserve for light roasts that we serve on bar on average, but generally we roast quite a few different profiles. So it's incredibly difficult to roast each coffee well, to each of those roast profiles. It takes a lot of time and attention. And I just go back to the 10,000 hour rule. You have to make every mistake possible to become a professional in any trade. So we've baked coffees and roasted them way too slow and long. We've roasted coffees in 3 minutes before at extremely high temperatures. But the nice part is we've tasted every single one of them afterward just to see what it would do. So it is nice to just play around in the beginning. It's okay, especially when you have another job and you can comfortably waste $10,000 worth of coffee, which not many people have the luxury to do. You can really experiment and stretch each coffee until you find the right shape and form of it. And then, of course, with better roasters comes better technology like Cropster that you can map every coffee and do overlays and really calculate what the changes of each coffee are. But that takes, absolutely forever to get there. So it's nice to start with a really basic roaster and some coffee that you can purchase online and start just experimenting. And there's tons of videos, even currently, that teach you how to do it. So there's a lot of resources out there, but nothing replaces just patience and experimentation.
Oh, it's interesting because you, of all people, having that background, technical background as well as culinary, have the interesting combination of skills in that you recognize that there is that tactic, the touch element, the experimental and experiential stuff along with the tech, because you could either rely only on the touch and none of the tech, or you could just go all tech and not really learn as much by touching the coffee and tasting the coffee as much. So it's great that you have that balance, and that's in your work history as well. It's almost like it's prepared you for exactly what you're doing now. And you mentioned the solar panels, and I know that sustainability is a huge part of what you do, and it's obviously of value to you. I mean, what, when did you start? I mean, obviously in the beginning you started, but like, where do your sustainability values come from, and what kind of things are you doing now with sourcing and sustainability in your operations that you think really makes a difference?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely just a nerd in general, a foodie, yeah, coupled with, again, just, yeah, like you said, a lot of the technical side of things and a lot of comfort with data and poring over everything and codifying everything, just trying to make it as consistent and stable as possible. And I think even the solar panels and trying to grow our own coffee and all the other things that we do is mostly along the same lines of just consistency and sustainability. I mean, if the power grid goes down, you have a solution for it. We collect rainwater. We've run hydroponics and aquaponics systems, and all the way down to just voting with our dollars and purchasing, products from companies like World Centric that do, +1 for the planet projects, sustainability projects. A lot of just reinvestment into communities, and same with the Coffee Quality Institute and the Alliance for Coffee Excellence. I mean, they support farmers. It's all backed by quality. So if they do good work, they get rewarded for it. And same with us. If we roast well and we can pick up new wholesale accounts and clients, we get a steady paycheck and we can feed our families too. So it's mostly just trying to understand just your place in the coffee industry and even your community locally, and trying to find the best way to do it. I think it's just a little bit of idealism as well. Just trying to, if you are going to do something for yourself, just really imagine what that's going to look like. And again, sitting at a desk for 10 years, you have plenty of time to research a lot of different elements of electric cars and how you can run them with solar energy, and just ways that you can lay a really good foundation and then build a lot of different elements on top of it. And I think really that's ultimately what we've done, is just slowly experimented with different ways of doing things. One of my favorite examples is using the solar energy from our house to power a Mitsubishi iMev. And then once we got a commercial account, we needed a commercial kitchen to roast out of. So we found a bakery that would let us use their kitchen. However, I couldn't really put solar panels on their building just because it was cost prohibitive. We just, solar powered our house. So I charged up my electric car with solar energy, drove it over to the bakery every time I would roast, and then plug in my electric roaster into the electric car, and then use the solar energy stored in the electric car to run a small batch roaster, essentially, which is probably the silliest thing we've ever done, and probably the only commercial coffee company that's used an electric car as a medium for transporting solar energy to roast coffee. It's just one of those ridiculous things where we just are so passionate about making sure that we do everything the hardest way possible, and ideally the best way possible, that we go through really ridiculous lengths to make sure that we're trying to account and hold ourselves accountable for everything that we possibly can do to make the coffee industry a little bit more sustainable and stable. But yeah, I think it really stems back to my upbringing in Colorado. I was born in Denver, but I grew up in the foothills. So I'm just a traditional Colorado hippie. A lot of our neighbors were really into wind energy, and there's a ton of solar activity out there as well. And yeah, we grew up just in a 10-acre mountain essentially. So there was just nature around us all the time, and our parents were really big on kind of paying attention to nature and taking down trees that had wood rot and things like that, and using it for firewood, and just different ways of going about living. So I think that was probably what spurred it on. And then again, as I got into cooking and even growing vegetables and things like that, it's just good to look at the organic side of things. And hydroponics and aquaponics really show you how quickly you can grow vegetables sustainably using a lot less water. You can collect your own rainwater through rain barrels rigged up to your gutters. You can put solar panels on your house to run the hydroponic and aquaponic equipment. And once you kind of develop a system and you see it work, it's really powerful, and it really changes your mindset on what's possible. And even as we travel to different coffee communities, we look at and help not push them into solar or hydroponics, but it is fun to just take videos of what you do and share them with farmers, and just start that dialogue with them to just show them just different ways of creating even food sources for their communities on site. And we have a huge passion for that. Would love to do more sustainability projects in some of these producing countries in the future.
Well, you're hitting on something that I think is so critical, because what people are hearing right now, I bet, is either people are really into sustainability and they're just cheering at what you're doing, right? Like, this is amazing. Or they are not really sold on it, but they think they probably should, and they feel like that's too much work to do all that. And you mentioned about the mindset that you've got. You kind of grew up with these values, and for you, it's just natural that you pursue business in tandem with the sustainability values. So it feels like, the first thing is not necessarily to glom on to sustainability practices, but kind of to work to create a mindset around it first, so that it's actually, that sustainability practice that you adopt is actually itself sustainable to you.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately a challenge, like a personal challenge for me, just to find better ways of doing things. From even roasting, just try to roast it a little bit quicker or a little bit slower the second time around, or have a different charge temp. I mean, all those are just practices and things that you challenge yourself. You don't necessarily have to do anything different, but you want to see what the outcome would be if you did something a different way. So I think as you run your own business and are in it for longer periods of time, you just want more challenges, similar to climbing mountains or racing cars or whatever. You want to see what those boundaries are and how you can push yourself a little bit further. So when you take the sustainability approach, it is fun to just try more challenging ways. And we're inspired by a lot of producers that we've found that do similar things, even all the way to sailing their coffee from origin to port. I mean, we've some Mexican coffee farmers that we met physically sail their coffee around. I mean, there's way more difficult ways of transporting coffee in more sustainable ways. So yeah, we've been watching episodes like Long Way Up with Ewan McGregor, where they take 2 electric motorcycles and 2 Rivian electric cars and drive them from South America to Los Angeles, and just charging along the way. They have a lot of solar panels that they use to try to charge up the bikes and things like that. And it's a very similar approach to how I kind of see our business. It's not the easiest way, but it's something fun that keeps you engaged for a longer period of time. But I totally understand that it's cost prohibitive as well. I mean, even Teslas are not inexpensive vehicles. $100,000, 30 kilowatt solar system is not achievable for most people. But if you plan on having a business for another 10, 20 years, it's a good investment up front, because you're going to have free electricity once you get that return on your initial investment. Similar to buying a coffee roaster versus buying from a coffee roaster, you can save $250,000 a year just for an average coffee shop. So it's huge savings in the long run. And again, it's better for the environment. It's better for your community as well. You're not wasting as much. So there's a lot of economics behind why we do what we do. It's more of a long-term bet on ourselves, as well as on this vision that we're building. And again, the current facility that I'm talking to you from is our old Coca Cola bottling facility. So it's a 100-year-old warehouse. Essentially, it's about 9,000 square feet altogether, but it has a 30 kilowatt solar system on it. But we purchased the buildings, the land. We have 5 acres with about 60,000 square feet of existing structures on it that we're trying to turn into this sustainability community, essentially, where we have food growing systems, and we support food pantries and a bunch of other sustainable things. But we're laying that foundation now for hopefully future generations, and people should be able to benefit from what we're creating long after we pass on. And I think that's, again, something that as you get older, you really want your life to matter down the road. And a lot of people, I think that way. It's just, how do you want to be remembered? What changes do you want to make in your community, and possibly across the world? And I think that's what's fascinating about it, what really keeps me going, is if you can create the right recipe and it's replicable, you can share it with a lot of different communities, and even, communities in different countries. It's more of a lifestyle for us. And I would love to invite as many people into it as possible.
Yeah, I mean, your impact is definitely, this day and age, much more far-reaching, with internet and the ease of travel that we have today, and also just beyond what you're doing with a roastery, because we've been talking about roasting a lot, but you have cafes and you are involved in your communities, and so I wonder if we can talk a little bit about how you run the cafes to be sustainable, maybe some of the tools that you use. And it's not the most sustainable part of the industry. In fact, some studies show that the cafe is the most wasteful in terms of footprint and et cetera. So with your cafe expressions, how do you maintain that sustainability with your equipment, with your tools, and your operations?
Yeah, so that is probably one of my favorite pieces of it. So our newest cafe up here in Gainesville was a 100-year-old scale house that we retrofitted to be a coffee shop. So the old scale that they would weigh grain on is our drive-through, and we have a 28 solar panel system set up for it so it can power itself. It has a Tesla charging station built into that as well. And then the interior build out is made out of reclaimed wood and even furniture from other coffee shops that have been passed on. But yeah, a lot of it's wood. We have coffee bags that are stapled up to the bar, so it has just decor made out of elements of coffee that we actually carry. Just reclaimed materials throughout. But in terms of the machinery, we have a Malkonig EK43, so that's a really precise high horsepower grinder that can grind coffee really quickly. But we were trying to do almost everything with the Boga ground control because that eliminates the need for a lot of different equipment. We do carry an AeroPress, which is one of my personal favorites. I'm still the undefeated DFW AeroPress champion since 2018, which we're proud of as well. But we do use AeroPress and a few pour overs, but the lion's share of the brewing that we do is through the Voga ground control, just because you can do a really good batch brew on it. You can do cold brew in a very short period of time through agitation and suction, as well as even a high TDS concentrate comparable to espresso. So it's just a Swiss Army knife of machines, and it takes up a really small amount of real estate, so we can focus a lot of the bar area on merchandise and service and keeping people socially distant as well. All of our equipment's on that back bar, but we have a lot of pallet wood in it. There's a lot of coffee elements that we include into the ebb and flow of the shop, but just more minimalism. I mean, there really isn't a whole lot in our Gainesville shop in terms of extra decor. It's pretty bare bones, minus the seating in the bar and everything. But it's also a really old building, and we try to preserve just the character of that building and pay homage to the history of that town, that building, and that industry, as well as give it a new identity with the coffee shop. But with the Corinth shop, it's a lot more art heavy. My dad's an artist, so we have all natural, just art throughout the whole thing. All of our couches are built out of coffee pallets. Our bar is built out of coffee pallets. It's really wood heavy, but it's in an industrial warehouse, so it really fits that motif just fine. But that one's also solar powered as well. It also has a car charging station. And then with that one, it's more approachable in terms of we offer a ton of different homebrewing options. So you have French press, you have AeroPress, we've got the Chemex, the Kalita, the V60, we have a Dino. There's just a ton of different brew options that we offer. And we also do a lot of homebrew workshops. And then everything that we use, we also sell, from Baratza grinders all the way down. So the point with that shop is to teach people how to do coffee at home, essentially, and just have an approachable way where they can come in and you can make them a drink, but show them exactly how you did it, what water that you used, all the way down to the grind setting. And you can help people diagnose what's going right or wrong with their coffee at home using your coffee and your equipment if needed. But it's just an approachable place where people can learn about coffee and you can share ideas and experiment a little bit more. And I really, really love that concept. But when you have a drive-through option, it's impossible to offer that level of service. So we're trying to go the opposite direction in our other cafe for speed, just because we're in a lot busier area with easier access to the main highway. So we're starting to do quite a bit more volume. So we wanted something a lot higher efficiency and a lot more streamlined, so that way we can serve a lot more people with a level of service that they've grown to expect with our brand.
Yeah, and I love the concept of helping people brew coffee at home, and it really helps them just understand coffee themselves a lot better. When we're talking about selling the whole bean coffee, I know you guys do interesting stuff with packaging for whole bean, because packaging is, when you look at the kind of things that are out there in the industry, we've got, a bag in a box, which is also in a bag in a box, and then that just gets thrown away. And so packaging can get kind of out of hand. So describe to us a little bit what you do for your own coffee packaging, at least there in the shops, that's helping the sustainability aspect of packaging.
Yeah, so we use mason jars for our tea, our coffee, and we even sell cacao husk tea, which is made out of the byproduct of the chocolate making process. So the other mason jars, which are canning jars that are made to hold food fresh for 18 months. And a lot of people don't realize that there's a ton of CO2 in coffee. One of those jars can hold 60 PSI. So when you open the lid for the first time after it's been roasted, it is almost explosive. We've seen lids that, fly off, and it'll wake you up really quickly, especially with the darker roast coffee. But the intent is to make sure that the coffee is stable. So the packaging is just as much for preserving freshness as it is sustainable. So the main thing is glass is made out of sand essentially, and it's infinitely recyclable. So it's one of the only packaging materials that's, again, infinitely recyclable. So you can grind it back into sand at the end of the day if you wanted to, or you can, heat it up and press it into any other shape later down the road. So we love that element. And I'm also really into ceramics. I have like a pottery wheel and a kiln. So we use glass with some of the coffee mugs that we've designed and thrown. I've made my own pour overs. I've teapots and things that I've made as well. But glass is huge, where you can shape it into just about anything useful that you need, similar to how clay can be turned into, from a ball of mud into a coffee mug. It's just really fun to see something organic turned into something magical. But beyond even the recycling side of things, we reuse the jars. So we purchase them back for $1 from each of our customers. And then we have a local vinyl maker that makes the stickers. And we have stickers that are probably 8 years old and they look brand new, that are on the lids of the jars, but they peel off and can be re-adhered to another jar just as easily. So our cold brew is sold in mason jars. We purchase the pint size or quart size mason jars back. For our really big wholesale accounts, we deal with country clubs and restaurants and things in the area as well, that we sell them these huge half-gallon jars of coffee that they can put in a hopper of an espresso grinder and crank out large volume that way. But even the coffee grounds, the chaff, we work with master gardeners clubs and collect a lot of the waste from those products and pass those along too. So yeah, glass is huge in the packaging side of things, but we even resell the jute coffee bags that our beans come in. And then even the Grain Pro liners are made out of polyethylene. So we've been able to fuse those together to make greenhouse covers, to grow coffee in potentially, but also a lot of other vegetables, just because it's really durable plastic. And if you fuse them together with an iron, you can make really huge sheets that have been daisy chained together to make plastic coverings for different things. So again, we're true hippies, where we try to really think about every element of waste we can possibly imagine and find ways to reuse it all. Because from the chaff in the grounds all the way down, there's something that can be gained from every single element. As long as it came from nature, it can usually be turned back into nature. Which is really fun. I'm particularly proud of the cacao husk. That's a huge waste product with making chocolate, is that outer skin and shell once it's roasted. And there's a lot you can do with even that alone. And it's incredibly good organic, Colombian indigenous cacao that we source. So it's really expensive, really nice chocolate. And we try to really use every single bit of it that we possibly can. And it's fun when you start experimenting with what each element does and how you can use it and turn it into something better, just upcycling to the purest sense of the word.
Wow, this is all so fascinating, and you truly have thought of everything. And then again, years from now, there'll probably be other things that you're doing to, continue that value of respecting nature and being sustainable. And these types of things are obviously good for business as well. And I guess that kind of brings me back to what I want to end our conversation with here today, which is, I know you're a busy guy. There's a lot of things going on now, more than ever, as you've grown since 2013. What do you spend most of your time doing these days? And as far as what we've talked about, what are the most important pillars of the business that really keep it stable and growing over the years?
You're very right in the fact that I don't get a whole lot of sleep, and I have a ton of ideas, and I wake up excited every single morning with a lot of things that I want to accomplish, and don't see any signs of slowing down anytime soon. And again, once you get to whatever level you dreamed of, like this was my 10-year plan to have my own facility, which we're in, have the world's largest solar power coffee roasting set up. But I have to work for a good 30, 40 more years easily. So our current project, and coffee is a huge part of it, but we have this maker space that we just created on site that has 20 small woman-owned businesses. Some make macaroons, some do fudge, or there's a hat company. There's a lady that makes custom leather goods. There's a bunch of different businesses that we're trying to bring into this community and just transform this 5 acres of downtown property into this mixed-use development where people can come and stay. And we're going to have a food hall and hopefully a brew pub, wine tasting rooms, because I'm also a wine and spirit education trust certified wine taster. So I want to do wine education classes, ideally even beer tasting and things like that. But just an area where people can get tied into food and community, music, arts. We have a rock climbing gym that's over 100 feet tall that we're in the process of developing. Potential zip lines around it, murals. Just we're trying to create a complete development center. So that's taken a tremendous amount of my time now. We're also working with a lot of universities and local food pantries and even some churches on creating a more sustainable food growing system using our hydroponics and aquaponics as well as traditional gardening. And we're hoping to grow enough coffee to eventually do a QP level 2 processing course, which is the quality or the Coffee Quality Institute's coffee processing certification course, which would be one of the only courses in the United States. I think California has the only other one that I've heard of so far. And yeah, we're hoping to grow our roasting cooperative on the coffee side and really open it up to be a proper SCA lab. We just ordered another $50,000 worth of equipment so we can get our SCA accreditation to have a proper lab set up so people can get their CQI, Q grading certificates, as well as possibly almost every SCA class we can imagine. And then even more for people that are wanting to get into the industry and do more workshops for people that are trying to get into entrepreneurship and different levels of accounting classes all the way down on just inventory management and just how to run a business. We have some really talented entrepreneurs that are already in our community, in our circle, that are renting space from me in this complex that we're incredibly excited to use as mentors for some of these newer coffee roasters or even just other small businesses that are trying to get started. I think ultimately we just want to see more people find their gift and share it with the world and just give them spaces to do it within, and then have those spaces again be built out of reclaimed materials and be run more sustainably. But I think one of the most ambitious things that I'm working on is creating a hydro battery, which is going to be run off of the solar. So if you think of it kind of like an hourglass, you pump the rainwater that you collect into the top portion of the hourglass, and then there's a turbine in the middle that produces electricity. So that way you can run completely off grid in just about any scenario. But currently that's the largest battery on Earth is hydro battery. So it's just using the basic elements of the Earth to create sustainable energy long term. But we hope that this model will work. And then if we're successful here, we have a couple of other site plans to expand into more of these community-led projects where coffee is just a good supporting role, just a meeting place where people can hatch these ideas and, plant their seeds of thoughts and, just start doing something beneficial for their communities. And hopefully this can be adopted in quite a few other communities around the United States, if not around the world. And people can take sites like ours that are old industrial sites and make them mixed use and make them really high functioning down the road.
Man, you got a lot going on, and I'm really thankful for your energy and your focus on this. It's a lot of work, but hopefully this kind of thing becomes more commonplace, and it certainly is ambitious, but yeah, looks like it's really making waves for you and working out well for your business too. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show and explain what you got going on there. How can we stay in touch with all of this progress and learn more about Combs Coffee?
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel. We have several different websites based on whether it's the coffee side of things that you're interested in or more of the sustainability project. But Cab Station is the project name, which stands for Community and Business. And then, of course, combscoffee.com, cabstation.net. There's Cab Station Market, which is it's a community-led group that is all of our makers that have collaborated together to come up with their own retail shop that we're setting up. And then Instagram, of course, Facebook. And hopefully we'll be having more classes online. We have Combs's offerings, which is our new green website that we just launched, where a lot of our education is going to be held online as well. So we're going to just keep growing those platforms and see where it goes, man.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been inspirational to hear your story and an honor to have you on the show.
No, it's my pleasure, and I can't believe I actually get to be on it.
Well, one of the things that I take away from this conversation with James is that our dedication to a vision or value is not just something that we apply to one project that lasts a few months or a year or so, but if it's a value that's close to our hearts, it's something that we apply to all of the things that we do, from the little to the big, from having the world's largest solar-powered roasting operation to just, choosing to use recycled furniture for your cafe. All of those decisions serve to reinforce your values, keep you consistent, and the compound effect of your consistency means that you inspire others over time to do the same thing with their business. And I love that example that James gives us with how he pursues quality and sustainability hand in hand. So a huge thank you to James for joining us on the show. Don't forget, we have a bonus episode with him with more content over at groundcontrol.coffee/KTTS. When you go there, you can find that episode and listen to the continued conversation with James as he gives some pretty important advice to those of us who want to make a difference with our business, especially in the realms of sustainability and not compromising on our values along the way. So again, that's over at groundcontrol.coffee/KTTS. And if you want to learn more about Combs's Coffee, you can just go right to their website, combscoffee.com. That's COMBS coffee.com. And with that, that is the end of the episode today and the end of the Thinking Differently series, brought to you by Ground Control and Keys to the Shop. And if you have any questions for me, simply email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. And I thank you so much for joining me on this series. Hopefully it has inspired you to think differently, to be creative with what you're doing with your business, and generally offered inspiration to help you thrive in your cafe. Thank you so much, and as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.